Yeah, it's a mystery. No one can figure it out. And it never gets old. It just never gets old. It's just the same old, same old. So I'm going to just restart this baby. Nobody go away. Let's. We're trying one more time. Well, hi everybody. Welcome to another flawless launch of the Stratosphere Studio Show. It's great to be here. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, and we are on a Monday night. Um, the did the did the live stream for the non-launch this morning. As I mentioned during the program, I think with that many people watching, I think Elon has a sort of a kind of a fiduciary obligation. We have millions of people watching to just, okay, I understand about safety and, and doing it right, but really he should have around 20 seconds, T minus 20 seconds, even with the problem, he should have just come in there and just put his jacket on and said, F it, we're going live, and just push the launch button. And if it turned out that, that it blows up, well, then, people got their money's worth. Uh, so anyway, the SpaceX Starship launch was supposed to be scheduled for this morning. We went live with it about 7 minutes prior to liftoff. They had a problem with the valves, so they've basically pushed it back about 3-4 days, and we'll get to that. We'll cover that as well when the time comes. It was great having Steve back, and Scott called in to our utter surprise from the jungles of deepest, darkest South America. That's undoubtedly going to win me lots of friends there. But he's out in a remote location out there. So I think what we'll do tomorrow is we will have him back audio wise, and we'll just do our regular right angles and so on. George says it's a convenient excuse to reschedule to 4:20. Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, it's good to be here. Good to see everybody. I did a little bit of work on some stuff that I'll show you. It took me a while to get it going, but I'll tell you, I sat down today for the first time to really start working on these assets for the Last Man on the Moon thing, which I am going to name. I've decided. I'll still call it Last Man on the Moon. But our friend Eric Blake, who is always there and occasionally comes up with some dynamite winners, came up with the name because we can't use Major Matt Mason on account of it being copyrighted. However, thank you, Don. However, Major Mace Mattingly will work, and I just love it. I love it. Major Mace Mattingly is perfect. Everybody knows what we're talking about, and no one can do anything about it. My perfect world. I do have a couple things to show you. Actually, I found something on CG Trader, which is one of the digital assets thing, and I found actually something I was looking for, and I didn't know whether I would find it or not. I know it's a hard thing to explain. 1 second here. So I've got an issue with how I'm going to handle this. I've got to find a style and a look, and I've got one test render for you. It's not spectacular, but it's a start anyway. And then I'd been looking for something to represent the moon base, and I'd shown you that one thing which was kind of like just a pressure capsule basically. But then I found this, and it did something that I've been wanting to do. Let me just grab a still here. Yeah. Grab a couple if I can here. Hang on a second. Stupid still grabbing. Where did it go? Oh, come on. It's here. I mean, hang on. Everybody be cool. Nobody panic, especially me. Let Could have sworn I saw more thumbnails earlier. I guess not. Okay, well, I'll run this one. So for the moon base for Major Mace Mattingly, Major Mace Mattingly, I found this. I'm not going to use that Rover, but I am going to use this, and I'll tell you why. For those of you, I guess I better find a picture of it just so, because not everybody's up on this whole thing here. There's something about this model that I like very much, and it kind of goes with this whole vibe I think I'm going to try and do here. There it is. So in order to understand why this particular asset is appealing to me, let me show you. That's so cool. Hang on. Yeah, that's what I want. Okay, so actually, that's not what I want. That's what I want. So check it out. So this is the Major Matt Mason's iconic space station, which I have spent a great deal of my life with. As soon as this thing comes up, there it is. So here's the Major Matt Mason space. Wow. There it is, and you'll notice it's comprised of a what is that? A hexagon or an octagon? Can't quite tell. It looks like it's a hexagon, and these panels unfold. And if you look at the model on the right, it's got a similar kind of a rotary thing there. And so one of the things that I'm going to be doing, just to tie it into Major Matt, I'm sorry, I can't say Major Matt Mason. I can't even say what I just said. Tying it into a Major Mace Mattingly is to kind of constantly reference back to the toy. And if you look at the actual render on the right, the relatively high quality one, you can see that it's got those kind of sectional sides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the round part on the right and get rid of this guy here. I'm going to take the round part on the right and I'm going to put it on girders. I'm going to raise it up. I'm going to put it on girders, and I'll have and once that thing is on girders and I have a beacon on the top, people will get it. So one of the things that that I'm trying to do here is to say that that basically assert that Mattel heard about this top secret mission, and they went and capitalized on it with a series of toys, and they changed the name because they didn't want to pay us. I actually like that little piece of sophistry very much. Very much. They changed the name from the real person on the moon, which of course is Major Mace Mattingly. They changed it to something like Major Matt Mason or something, weak like that, so that they could sell the toys. Now, if I put that thing that you just saw up on girders, especially with the second floor, and I know how to do this, it will look like what I want it to look like. In other words, I want to create images that look like the basis for the Major Matt Mason toys that were derived from them. So I think all of that. I think that was actually a pretty cool idea. So I like that quite a lot. Now I did, as I said, I did do a couple of things here. First of all, I mentioned I found my Aurora model, my original Aurora model, which I had terribly feared had gone. And I was only able to render one still of it untextured because the thing is monstrous. It's millions and millions of polygons. And I didn't do a super high res picture of it, but I did one that is that I pushed in on. So just to show you some of the geometry on this Aurora thing, this has not got anything to do with the last man on the moon. I just haven't had a chance to see this file in a while. Let me just make sure that's it. No. Why aren't you working? Hang on. It's one of those damn days I can feel it. It should have worked. 1 second. Everybody be cool. Everybody just be cool. Everybody be cool. Nobody panic. Especially me. I try it one more time because this thing renders super fast. Export. Add to render queue. Yes. There it is. Yes. Lossless. Yes. And we're going to resize. Yes. And we want Uh-huh. Uh-huh. I just want whoop. See, it just renders it square. You know what? I'll save this till next time. I'll save it till next time. I'll have some more, but I do have one other thing to show you that I've already loaded. Um, so, I was able to get a couple of suits, and I was hoping to have a lot more, but I sat down to Unreal for the first time in 6 months, and I forgot how Unreal works. I just forgot. I'm looking at this stuff and I'm thinking this is vaguely familiar, but I honestly cannot remember how to run this software. So it took me quite a bit of time just to figure out how to get this. So this is probably not the suits we're going to use for the surface. I just like it a lot. It's a very, very, very simple test, but I just wanted to see what it looked like. So this is a high quality Mercury spacesuit on the lunar surface, and it's just the Mylar. I rotated it around so that I could see if it was reflecting the moon correctly and stuff. So it's not a big deal. We'll have a lot more next time. But anyway, here's that thing that I was talking about here. Let's have a look. Oh, hang on. That's because I'm on top of it, right? Is that it? Yeah. Okay. So I'll run this a couple loops. Come on, do it again. Yeah. I think it looks fantastic. I just love it. In fact, I love that silver suit so much, I'm very tempted just to do the silver suit. I just frickin' love it. One more time for good measure here. And I love the idea of actually saying, "Oh yeah, Mercury. We actually went to the moon during Project Mercury, and that is my favorite spacesuit by a wide margin." So I think it actually looks pretty good, and that's something to think about. But that Mylar just really, that's just the bomb, man. I just love that stuff. Did I? Sure enough, did. Hang on. So, starting to make some progress here after months and months and months of not being able to do anything, but it's starting to get there, and I really like that Mylar suit very much. Okay, that's what I was looking for. Sorry. Okay, you can go away. So there's that, and it's just such a badass suit, you know. I've got, I think I can show you a still of this too, if you'll pardon the pause here. So this is the suit that I think I'm going to probably go with. I just downloaded it a couple hours ago, so it should be fairly handy given my sales purchases. Let's see here. Come on. Yep. Here we go. Hang on. So I showed this before, but I'm going to just show it one more time because it's kind of cool. This is what I was thinking we would use for the Major Matt Mason suit. I'm sorry, the Major Mace Mattingly suit. And I'm still inclined to want to do this. I showed that before. Yeah. So I think that looks wicked cool. And I'll see how that works on the moon, on the lunar surface, I mean. But I like the Mylar so much, I'm actually thinking that maybe when they're inside the station, they'll wear that, and they'll wear those suits when they go out on moonwalks. I know for a certain fact they're going to wear the Mylar when they go into the suspended animation tube. That's a absolute requirement. So I don't know. I'm having fun, and that's one thing. It's like that's how things actually get done for me, is when I'm having fun with them and not just having fun for the sake of fun, but finding like a new way to do it. A lot of people like the silver Mylar thing as well. Our friend AOC says, "Will the last man have weapons? What kind and what for?" Well, of course he'll have weapons, if for no other reason than to give him a warm, cozy feeling when he drives around on the lunar surface. It's actually an interesting question because I am relatively quickly, I don't have to do this right away, but somewhere along the line, I'm going to have to decide how advanced this moon base is. The moon base that I just showed you earlier, I'll push 5 buttons and one of them will probably be it. Hey, got on one. That's a lot more advanced than I originally thought, but I can live with that. I also found there's a lot of rovers, and got to go to a different site here. And so for the rovers, again, I didn't want to use anything that I can use on the colonies, and I wanted something that had a retro look. So let me see if I can find this still real fast. And I can end up just using all this stuff. So I found one that looked like, yeah, this looks like a 1960s rover concept. Also, it looks like, just to talk while I'm talking, it looks like we are set for the great Boomer reunion road trip. Looks like it's going to be happening, and I haven't bought the tickets yet, but I'm getting very close to it. It looks like we will probably be there. I've got a final check on the itinerary. I don't want anybody to go to the bank on this yet, but it looks like we will be there at the Air Force Museum either a week from this coming Saturday or Sunday. And I will know the details of that very shortly, and I'll post those. Is this it? Hang on. It doesn't ring a bell. Actually, no. But on CG Trader. Sorry about the delay. However, yeah, let's try this. I like it because it looks 1960s. And all I have to do is find it. And I'd love to get your take on it. Is it no? I should probably put it in my wish list somewhere. Let's see. But I've got the assets, so now, and compared to the rest of there it is. Compared to the rest of the stuff, this should actually be relatively easy. So tell me if this has got the right feel for you for a 1966 moon rover that was brought up to the surface here. And, thinking about using this. Hey, look at that. I just think that looks very primitive and very kind of NASA original artwork cool. Somebody said we just lost the Twitch stream. Is that true? There we go. Looks like it's there. So yeah, I think that's cool looking. And for some reason I can't understand, the spherical pressure chamber is not attached to the back. So I guess that means that the entire stuff on the back is just machinery. And the more I think about that, the better I like it, because now that sphere is more or less the size of the lunar module. And I just think it looks really, it's a damn good model too. It's just a lot of detail in there and stuff. So we'll scuff it up and we'll get it a little dirtier and see what we can do with it. So it's starting to come together. I'm still searching for, I need to make sure that base is not the same one as the Hab from The Martian. I don't think that one that I showed was from The Martian. It didn't say that was from The Martian. Let me double check it, because you're right. That would be a bit of a problem here. Ah, golly. Well, you know what? I'll check that. Oh, here it is. Hang on. No. I'll check it. Now I'm just losing my mind because I want to find all this stuff and just got it right here. All right, last chance. This is like the most unbelievably awful feeling in the world. This sense of like, oh, come on. And the more you do it, the more lost you become. My sales analytics wish list. Are you really gonna be that way? All right, it's not sorting it correctly. Deal with it. I'll show it to you next time. But I'll check it, make sure that it's original artwork. Dennis Smith says, if I was born 20 years earlier, me and Bill would have been best friends. We could be best friends now. Who knows? I'm not going to hold your youth and inexperience against you. So, other than Dave said, maybe top heavy for a moon rover. Yeah, okay, that's great. Maybe we'll put outriggers on it or something. Maybe they'll weld some outriggers on there. And it does look a bit like the EVA pod from 2001: A Space Odyssey. I think it's painfully ugly, but I also really like the vibe, and it's not really stealing anything from the colonies, although it's actually really pretty cool. And we'll dirty it up, get some of that nasty moon dust on there. I also bought, although it didn't work, it was a different kind of file. I'm trying to see if they can do a conversion. Bought an 81K moon, which means the textures are 81K. You know, this is a HD image. 4K is high resolution. 81K is a lot of pixels. And I need a great moon, and I need a really good Earth too, because these guys are going to be sitting there, and we'll see what we're kind of doing. But I think what this thing will do is it'll start out with just basically approaching the moon, and then just getting closer, and I can't be a long thing, and gets to a crater down near the South Pole, and with the moon with that kind of resolution, you can really get in there. I also found a couple of really great lunar surfaces, one of which was the one that you saw here, this Mercury thing. There's about I see what's going on. There are about, I don't know, 20 different cameras in different locations, but this particular moon surface, and run that one more time, has, it's down to the grain. It looks really good. I got to get rid of the stars, but I just rendered what I had there. So, man, I like it a lot. And then I have to do the metahuman faces. I've got one that's pretty close to my face. I don't know whether I should use that for me or not. I kind of think about it, maybe. Sad Wings Racing has a great idea. Just put dual sets of wheels on it. I can just duplicate the wheels, spread them out a little bit, give it a little wider stance. But that's actually coming together, so that's good news. I saw, as we were launching this flawless production, flawlessly, somebody had said that they had seen the Gorn guest host on the Image AI thing, and that they liked it. Because I did an hour and a 5-minute version of the Gorn first for members only show. Our backstage show is about an hour, generally speaking. We just, rap about things, man. And when we did that, I had to bring the Gorn in a bunch. And so what I did was I did a lot of voiceovers on top of other people talking, and it was not well received. The Gorn identity, love it. Not well received. So I was really camera shy about that. But the one that went out was more or less what I had in mind, and I was actually pretty happy with it. I thought it was spectacular. And I loved the captions. Those were really fun. I was talking about that last time about, it's fun to be able to just write jokes. I just got a bunch of those renders, and I just thought, all right, what's this one? If that were a real picture, what would that be about? He did have a bad attitude. You would have a bad attitude too if the entire rest of the universe was filled with inferior beings. But anyway, I had a lot of fun with it, so that was great. Okay, so I think what we'll do is we'll probably do some questions and see. Thank you very much, Swen. I appreciate it. See how we can do on those things. I've got. I don't have a place to go. I'll be here, but I do have notes to do on episode 9 of the Cold War, which is my all-time favorite, Cloak and Daggers. It's the only episode that's an hour and a half. It's essentially 2 episodes. So there. Somebody asked about the weapons. This is part of that thing where I have to decide what the rules are going to be for this, and the rules are not going to be the same as they are for the colonies. I am almost certainly going to have a ray gun. And if I have a ray gun, you got to see the beam. But if not, I'll just give him a 45. Actually, there's something about that feels really kind of better, doesn't it? I don't know. This is actually, that question about the weapons is a really good test for this. Big part of me wants to have a ray gun like Lost in Space ray gun, and another part of me wants to have just a 45, which is plenty deadly. And I don't know which way to go. They would both, Eric wants to know which ones would work in a vacuum. They'd both work in a vacuum. You would not see the laser beam. And if there's not going to see the beam, you might as well do it. Sad Wings Raging says, gyrojet pistol, real gun designed to work in space. I imagine it's kind of recoilless, basically. It's essentially a small little rocket launcher, I would have to guess. Now, the nice thing about that is, if it were, because recoil's a bit of an issue, especially in 1/6 gravity. Nice thing about this gyro jet thing is that if it's essentially a little rocket launcher, that conceivably could leave a smoke trail, which would dissipate real fast, but there'd be some kind of vapor coming out of the back of it. So that would be cool. I don't know. I'm thinking I'm kind of inclined towards the 45. Regular gun would work just fine in space. Yes, the oxidizer is built into the gunpowder, actually. So it'll work in space, it'll work underwater, and all of that. So I don't know. And then on the other hand, I just like the laser beam. I think I'll probably go with the gun. Still trying to figure out what to do with the Soviets. The Soviet moonlander is, and they built one. They only threw in the towel after that second N1 rocket blew up. But the Soviet, do you need an atmosphere for combustion and smoke, says Marusha? You need oxygen for combustion, but the oxygen's built into the gunpowder because it's a sealed cartridge, obviously, so that thing's not getting air even on the Earth. So, yes, I know I definitely want to make it more realistic than Major Matt Mason, but at the same time, I don't know if I really want to be completely constrained to that. I don't know. I'm wrestling with it. Adam Bowman says, what did you think about the return of the Enterprise D? Haven't seen it yet. I'll take a look at it in a second. I was just going to go check on one thing. What the hell was we just talking about? There's a lot of the lander. Right. Give me 1 second here. I'll have to tell you, it took guts. It took guts. And everything that the Soviets did took... There's a really good Gemini capsule. Oh, it's not great. No, that's garbage. Where was it? Must be on the other side. Hang on. The thing about the Soviet moonlander is that it's a single-person vehicle, and that's a picture. And I give them major props for that. But when you think about when you listen to the mission, I don't see any way one person could have done this. Here's the Soviet lander. It's just cool. I mean, it's really cool. If you look on the inside of it, it looks like a industrial boiler. I mean, the tubing and the plumbing is it's right there. It's just primitive as hell. But it was one person, and I can't imagine doing that mission, that landing by yourself. It's not Lunokhod. Lunokhod was, if I remember correctly, was their automated rover. They had a rover, and I think the Russians brought back a sample before Apollo did. All I remember was that as Apollo was entering lunar orbit, there was a Soviet probe already there trying to, well, they're not going to put the first man on the moon. Maybe they, that was all about first. The first this, the first that. They were just trying to bring, okay, well, at least we'll bring the first moon rock back. But I don't think that happened. I do remember my dad saying in an ominous, ominous fashion that if the Soviets tried anything against our Apollo guys, that'd be the other shoe dropping. Just love the idea that my dad's first thought about hearing that there were Russians orbiting the moon as our Apollo guys were going was that they were planning some sort of torpedo or something, which I wouldn't put past them actually. Yeah, that's about it. Fiery Waco says, amongst our weaponry are such diverse elements as lasers. We have three main weapons: lasers, 45s, M16s, and four main weapons: lasers, 45s, M16s, and bazookas. Yeah. So anyway, they certainly landed. Eric said the Russians just shot something at the moon. It crashed. They were the first thing on the moon. That's absolutely true. The first Russian probe to land on the moon landed. It was actually a small sphere, and it had it was a bit like a grenade. It was that's what it was. It was a small sphere, and it had hammer and sickle things, and it was designed to fracture. So they ran this thing into the lunar surface real fast, and the thing apparently just went and shot, I don't know, 12 of these discs some incredible distance. That'd be worth finding, actually. That really would be cool. Yeah, and GK Masterson says in space you're going to get a lot more range. You're not going to get drop, and you're not going to get, you're not going to get. I'm wondering how far that bullet would go because you don't get any atmospheric drag. It's an interesting question to see if you could shoot. Clearly, could you shoot a bullet into orbit? Technically, you can't because even if you could, that bullet is going to go into a trajectory where on the far side of the moon, it's going to be at its highest point above the moon, and then it's going to come back and it's going to hit you in the back of the head. In order for it to be in an orbit, it's got to circularize, which means that bullet would have to have a little more kick on the other side of the moon, and then that would put it into a circular orbit. But Eric Blake says 4, and that gave me another grand idea. Thank you, Eric. Those of you who remember the glory days, the Alan Shepard on Apollo 14, which was a strange mission, really. It's kind of a forgotten mission. 12. Nobody remembers 12 because Conrad, or was it Alan Bean? I think it was Bean. Pointed the video camera at the sun by accident after he turned it on. So that was no video for the second moon landing. There just wasn't any. It just burned the camera right out. 13 was, of course, the big gigantic rescue, and that's a very famous mission. 14 was Shepard's mission, and the reason it's kind of forgotten is because it was the last moon mission without a rover. So he had a little cart, and Shepard took a golf club up there with him, and took a whack at a golf ball, played golf on the moon. And I thought, that was pretty cool. Ryan Retrogamer 7 says, I'm sad my generation doesn't believe in the history of NASA. I'm sad about it too. I did think, independently of your comment, however, I did think of a line that these astronauts can have, and they can be watching anything that I want them to watch. So they could be watching one of these things, moon landing denial thing. And I'll get something, I'll lift, one of the moon landing denial things. And I'll take the part where somebody says, you can't go to the moon without computers. That's what would be on the TV, on the old, went to the moon with slide rules. You're the ones who can't do it without computers. It's not like all these calculations have to be performed at the same time. It's actually pretty easy. Come to think of it, it's pretty simple. And yeah, so that's just really crazy annoying. And what was the other thing I saw that was really kind of cool? It was just before we started talking about golfing. It was a neat. Somebody. I guess it was a comment about about the generation. We did have computers then. As a matter of fact, yes, of course, we used a computer to land on the moon. We had a real simple one, but it did its job. So, yeah, I don't know why they're having such a hard time believing it. I do. I had some thoughts about that. I think the reason that the further away from the moon landing you get in terms of when you were born, the less you believe in the moon landing in terms of raw numbers, is because I think ultimately, emotionally, they cannot bear the fact that their forefathers were that much more advanced than they are. I think that's really what drives it. I think that's emotionally it. It's intolerable to many young people to think that their grandfathers did something that they can't do, and they did it without their devices. I think that really scares them. And I think what it really scares them is, I think on some level it reminds them of this kind of nagging subconscious sort of thing that I think exists, not among everybody, but I think exists out in Gen Z. And that is that since boomers like me are constantly telling them how badly educated they are, okay, boomer. But on some level, I think they probably realize that they are missing something. That there's just an enormous hole in their education enforced by their elders. They didn't do that to themselves. But I think that's what it is. I think it's that they can't bear to believe that it was done by that boomers went to the moon. And I had to qualify that for a second. Was Neil Armstrong technically a boomer? I don't know. He wasn't greatest generation. He came right in that kind of Korean War sort of thing. But in any event, I think that it's intolerable to them. And so they have to, can't have gone to the moon because these two shadows aren't parallel, you see. That explains everything. And the fact that you can take your iPhone out to a parking lot and see plenty of parallel lines not looking parallel is apparently beyond their ability. The silent generation, that's it. Thank you, Air Techie. That's right. There was a generation between, or half a generation anyway, some weird cohort between the greatest generation and the boomers. Silent generation. Yeah, that's right. So anyway, let's do some questions. Why don't we? 1968 Camaro SS. And they had to drive to push through their difficulties. Yes, I think that's another thing too. I think it's not just that they are not really wanting to look at the fact that their grandparents were smarter than they were, but I don't think they like the fact that their grandparents were just tougher and braver. I don't think that. I wouldn't like to think that I was a lesser son of greater sires. All right, so let's see here. We'll get let's get some questions at long last, some questions answered on this question answer show. All right. So I think somebody said episode 5 is up on Cold War now, or 6. I know that the producer asked me to get these notes in on episode 9. I'm about 2/3 of the way through episode 9, and I have 250 notes. It's not an exaggeration. I counted them somewhere right around 250 notes. It's a lot of notes, man. Reform. Let's see what we got here. Come on, you beast. And thanks again to Bob, and not to Bob, to everybody who's been curating this, Marusha, and everybody else. I'm very grateful. All right, GK Masterson. I saw this come in not too long ago, and I mean, shortly. Let me rephrase that. I saw this several days ago, and I'm glad it's here. And I'm glad I get a chance to answer something from GK and Eric and Marusha and all the rest of the regulars here. So from GK Masterson, hey Bill, do you think that movies and TV are going to continue to dominate cultural storytelling narrative setting, or do you think that gaming, especially online gaming, will eventually outstrip those particular forms of media? Great question. I don't think that computer gaming is ever going to tell a story. It can't. There's a story I've told before, and I think it probably bears repeating here. And thank you, Monk in Training. Clevin said something similar, that people want to believe that today is better than yesterday and tomorrow is better than today, ergo no moon landing. Must have been the other Clevin. So here's an interesting thing that kind of ties together a bunch of things we've talked about. I might have said this once or twice before. And Monk in Training says men try to live up to the images of their father. I actually don't know if that's still true. They used to. I did. But I think now they're kind of like walking away from it. Anyway, here's the deal. When I was at the University of Florida as a in the theater department, and virtually everybody was there to be actors, but I was there to be a writer. And there was no film school at UF at the time. I don't even know if there is today, but there certainly wasn't then. We made movies and entered them through the English department into competitions. And I made a 16 millimeter movie when I was 19 or 20 called The Pigeonhole. And that was a Student Academy Award regional finalist for the East Coast, I think. So I'm proud of that. There was, so this would be late 70s, early 80s. Right around then, there was the first or second case where they had, in a movie theater, the ability for the audience to vote on what happens next. That at 5 or 6 or 7 points during the course of this movie, is a gimmick, obviously, but during the course of the movie, people would get to vote as to what do you do? Do we rescue the girl? Do we go back to the house? That kind of thing. And so when that came out, David Shelton, who's the only person there who really knew his stuff. Horst Mumbler says, hey, Bill, that requires fathers with images worth living up to begin with. Amen to that, brother. So our resident genius, the guy really taught me everything I know about drama and all the rest of this stuff, was saying it's the end of writers. We don't need writers anymore. There won't be any writers. And even then I was able to say, Dr. Shelton, I don't think that's the case, because here's where it gets pertinent to what your question is, GK. If you give the audience the chance to vote on what to do in real time, which is essentially what a game is, right? A game is an interactive experience. If you make interactive movies, then the audience is always going to vote for good things to happen to the protagonist because they like them. No one's ever going to vote for the protagonist to take a beating or for the protagonist to, lose. So every single movie, if you have an audience interacting with it in real time, every single movie, every single protagonist becomes a Mary Sue. Nothing bad ever happens to them. It's hard enough as a writer to force yourself to have bad things happen to the characters that not only that you like, but those characters are you. That's your voice. And so they're never going to be replacing writers because audiences need to be taken places where they don't want to go. That's how it works. It's a really important point. What if the protagonist is Brie Larson, BMB LKC, I think? Well, in that case, there's always the, nuclear option, nuclear. Brie Larson is just a horrid person. And they're doing another Captain Marvel movie and just horrible. Mercy says, plenty of games have story. Yes, they have story. Yes, that's true. But they don't have... You get a bunch of different choices, but I've played enough of these games to know that if you fail a mission, it puts you back where you were, and essentially, you go through the levels and you don't get to do the last levels first. And I don't want to hear about exceptions. I mean, it's basically how it works. So they don't perform the same way. Now, the bigger question is, I think, is what form will these movies take? Look, movies and television, as movies and TV as we understand them today, are not going anywhere. You'll be able to someday perhaps have 3D technology and all of this stuff, but basically recorded entertainment is going to look more or less the way it does now. And the only reason I can say that with confidence is because all movies have done is give us the means to, not all, it's probably the second most important invention in the history of mankind. It gives us the means to tell stories without the storyteller being physically present. Writing did that. And reading a book, if you've got a good imagination, is just tremendous. And some books suffer when you put them into movies because basically your imagination's working better than the people on the movie. However, on a half decent movie, your imagination simply cannot keep up with it. And I don't even think, let's take the obvious example. So Tolkien developed this incredible world, right? All these details. It's all coherent. We all know who Tolkien is. I believe that if Tolkien were to sit down and watch the Lord of the Rings movies, I think he'd be blown away. I really do. I think he'd just be blown away because those movies are such brilliant collaborations. I think the reason he'd be blown away is because it's definitely his story, but Tolkien was a linguist. He wasn't an art director. He wasn't a set designer. He wasn't, a casting director. He may have feelings like, well, I don't know if I really would have seen Elrond that way, but when you show him Rivendell, I mean, he can't possibly have imagined the nature of the elven architecture. I just can't imagine that he got all of that. And when you first see Khazad-dûm in the Mines of Moria, I just slack-jawed. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I loved it. And I think he would have been amazed by that. Colonel Angus says he would have been pissed off about the Amazon trash. Yes, he probably wouldn't even have been too upset about it. He would have probably just laughed at it and said, I don't know why it says my name's on it, but there you go. So storytelling is going to be here. It's going to be more or less in this form. The thing that movies do that nothing else really can do is not just give you pictures and sound instead of using your imagination. The most amazing thing about movies is the power of the cut. That's the thing that movies brought to the storytelling table, is the cut. That didn't exist in stories prior to movies. I just don't think it was possible. Thank you very much for that, Starlaw. A little tip for the Gorn Captain and his conquest. Thank you very much. Think about it. If you're telling a story, you're unwinding traditionally. Back for the last 200,000 years, you're unwinding this narrative thread, right? And you have to make that thread a constant connection because you want the people who are listening to the story to follow the story. But movies figured out that you could basically take somebody out of one place and instantly, in a 24th of a second, put them someplace else. And that the brain would be able to follow this. We'd be able to track it. And that was revolutionary. It doesn't really seem like it should make sense. Movies should, on some level, at least on the superficial level, movies should drive us a bit insane. You could make the case that if humans first saw movies, they just would have gone insane. It's like, I'm in a living room, now I'm outside. It's like, there's no experience that we have like that in terms of real time. But I think the reason that the edits and cuts work is because while our senses don't work that way, our memory does. I think that's what it is. Our memory does work that way. We can remember playing with Major Matt Mason things, and I can remember the Apollo 11 launch, then I can remember 9/11, those three events. And I went from one to the other, like cuts in my head. I didn't have to do the intermediate steps. I just plain did it. Major Matt Mason, Neil Armstrong on the ladder, 9/11. Those are cuts. So I think the reason that movies are magical is because the power of the cut works. Cuts work. And when you have somebody who knows what they're doing, both writing and directing, a cut will make a statement that nothing else does. I mean, the power of the cut. I'll tell you one thing that's actually really good indicator of the power of the cut, and it's going to seem so trivial, and it is kind of trivial, but it's just a really good, accessible micro lesson. There's a number of videos out there. They're collection videos, and what they are a collection of videos, and they're all perfectly timed screams. I forget what they call them, but basically, it's a number of people who are genuinely in real life scared or something. And the reason it makes you laugh is because the person doing the edit allows just that first beat of the scream to come in, and then you're out. And that is hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. It's just funny. If you heard the scream, it wouldn't be anything at all. But that ability to cut that scream off halfway makes it funny because you're in the situation where there's this tremendous emotional trauma, and now you're not. Just instantly you're gone. And it makes you laugh because your mind fills in the rest of the scream. You don't get to hear it. I find those things to be hilarious. And similarly to those, you don't see them much anymore, but there's a number of them out there where you would have some normal situation, and then you would cut away to a voice saying, Allahu Akbar, and then there'd be an explosion. And it didn't matter what it was, as long as there was something percussive happening in that original video, like a guy drops a hot dog or something. Drops a hot dog, Allahu Akbar, and then you show a ammo dump exploding or something. That was hilarious. And that's all through the cut. That's just plain the cut. I'm wearing my jacket, by the way, because they did finally fix our air conditioning after only 7 months, and it went off at 6. But it is. You can hang meat in here. It's like, see your breath cold, and the thermostats aren't working. So I guess I'd rather have that than I certainly would rather have that than go through another California summer without air conditioning. But anyway, it's getting a little toasty in there. There you go. Okay, so anyway, GK, that I think that the narrative style of movies will be there. Question is, where do you watch them? Movies are in the theater, I'm sad to say, are really just going. COVID really helped push this along. But when you'd watch a movie on TV and the screen was this big and the resolution was 480 by 360, I think that's what NTSC was. And the sound is coming from that tiny little speaker, then there's a good reason to go see a movie, especially a big blockbuster movie. But now with home theaters and the sound, the surround sound, and all the rest of that stuff, it's just so close that there's very little reason to go out there. And that's a real shame, because a movie watching movies a communal experience. If you watch Raiders of the Lost Ark at home, you'll have a very different and much worse experience than watching Raiders of the Lost Ark in a movie theater with a packed room full of people who've never seen it before. And I did that. I was in a movie theater, watched Raiders of the Lost Ark. I didn't think I would like it going into it because it looked kind of like I don't know, what is this, historical kind of stuff? Wasn't science fiction, so I was like, oh, that's probably not going to be great. You get in there and it's like, what? I knew what he was doing with Raiders of the Lost Ark right immediately after he escapes the big rolling rock when he's trying to steal the idol. When I saw the map and then that line of the route that was taken, I said, okay, I got it. Once they showed me that map with the line, I realized, okay, this is a early 40s movie, and it's the early 40s, and he's going to do it in the early 40s, so I'm on board completely. And I have seen, let me think about these top three. 1, 2. Yeah. I think the three most energetic crowd reaction scenes I've ever seen are in Jaws, which I saw in a packed theater, when they're down there diving on that small boat, which has a hole in it, and he's looking around there in the flashlight, and that head drifts into the frame. That audience left their chairs. I mean, you could actually almost feel the vibration, people just literally jumping out of their skin. That scared people more than anything I've ever seen. And when that happened, and it's not a climax of the movie, it's not at all. That's why it's so scary. Deserted boat, right? And the shark has been there because there's a big hole in it. And then he's looking in, and this head just floats into frame. And I thought, oh dear God, that scared the Jesus out of me. That was an electric moment. I saw The Wrath of Khan in a packed movie theater on opening day, filled with Star Trek fans. In fact, some good friends of mine went to the show before us. We wanted to all go together, but one of them couldn't make it, so some of our friends went to the show before us. So we're standing in line waiting to come in when they come out. And this is coming off of Star Trek The Motion Picture, which was the kind of movie that you kind of like Phantom Menace. You tell yourself you really, really like it. Just keep telling yourself how much you like it. It's not good. And so after we'd had a chance to digest that, we're waiting in line to go see Wrath of Khan on opening day. And our friends come out, and we said, how is it? And they said, oh, it's Star Trek. And I thought, okay. And man alive, it was Star Trek. When Kirk takes that bite out of the apple and says, I don't like this, Mr. Spock. And it's like people just cheering. But by far, I can't think of anything that's even remotely close to it. The most explosive reaction I ever saw from an audience was when Indy's confronting that guy with a scimitar, and he's doing this whole thing, and he just got this look like, I don't have time for this. Reaches down, grabs his pistol, just shoots the guy dead, and walks away. That movie theater came out of their chairs over that. They just came out of their chairs. I mean, people were just standing up, cheering for that. It was like what? You know what it sounded like? It sounded like a touchdown. It sounded exactly like a touchdown. Just that roar of approval. It was fantastic. So all of this stuff, GK, is none of this stuff's going away. The question is, where will you see it? I am very worried that, and I'm part of this because I haven't been to a movie in a long time. That's largely because most of the movies out there are garbage. I've never seen such unremitting garbage in the theaters. I would say to Natasha, want to go see a movie? Yeah, let's have a look. And then you look, it's like nothing. There's 16 screens. How can there be 16 nothings? Nope, nothing out there. But anyway, we saw Maverick in the movie theater, and that is an experience you should have in a movie theater. Because if you've ever seen the old shows like Gilligan's Island or Bewitched or something, the laugh tracks on those were so bad. The canned laughter is just awful. It's like they've got one tape, and when Gilligan makes a joke, there's a guy who just goes, they're terrible. They used to call that sweetening. It was Desi Arnaz who invented the sitcom, invented it. And Gilligan's Island is not a sitcom, neither is Bewitched. Oh, I guess Bewitched might be. Desi Arnaz had an incredibly talented wife, and Lucille Ball was only really good when she was interacting with that audience. She was not a nice person. I've never seen her interviewed where I didn't think, oh, she's just a nasty, mean-looking person. But Lucille Ball had incredible comic timing, and especially knew exactly how long to hold an expression to keep the audience going. She had just an uncanny ability to just dial that in, you know. She would hold a face or an expression or a reaction or something perfectly, long enough so that this thing would peak, and never, ever, ever did she go past that maximum laugh when she let it go. So here's Desi Arnaz's problem. He's pitching the show. It's got a Cuban lead in it. That was really, really revolutionary, and damn near didn't get the show produced because they wanted Lucy to have an American husband. And she said, we're doing the show with my husband, or we're not going to do it. And so they took a chance on Ricky Ricardo. And Desi was a great straight man. He really was. That's a thankless job. But Desi Arnaz was a genius. And he realized that his problem is, I've got my wife who's got the best comic timing ever, who's able to read an audience better than anyone, and I cannot film her without an audience. Can't do it. The way movies work are you just sit there. If you're an actor on a movie, you simply sit in your dressing room for 2 hours while they relight the next scene and get the set. You just sit there and do nothing. Then they call you in, and there's a whole bunch of, hoopla. Do your lines, and you get 5 takes, and you're done. Now it's time to set up the next setup, and now you wait for another 5 hours. And that's how they were shooting things like Leave It to Beaver and all the rest of that stuff. They would just shoot it like a movie. And okay, everybody ready, settle, and okay, so this will be the close-up, take 6, snap, and off you go. And Desi realized that he wouldn't have a show, and his wife would bomb without an audience. So now he's got a practical problem. He needs an audience in there, and he has to have that audience because Lucy cannot be Lucy without that laughter. She can't do it. And so he said, okay, so if we have an audience, could we pull this off? People will sit through plays. That's been going on since there have been people. So you could put people into a situation where they're coming, and what they're really seeing is not a TV show. They're seeing a play, and we're filming it. And then somebody says, well, that sounds great, Desi, but the problem is, the way we shoot movies is we set up the camera, we do a 2-shot, then we go and we do Desi's reversal, and then we go and take the same camera, do Lucy's reversal. We do it all in one camera. And Desi said, well, we can't do that. We can't play the scene 4 times. Number 1, the audience isn't going to laugh on the second 2. And number 2, they're not going to sit and watch the show 4 times. We just can't do it. And he was the one who said, why don't we get 3 cameras in there? And why don't we get 3 cameras in there? And since we need a lot of coverage, those 3 cameras are going to have to be choreographed. CP Tome says it was 4 cameras. I thought it was 3. It might be 4. So when I was at doing the cheer stuff, and I got invited to a number of screenings, just regular sitting there in the audience with everybody else. But the blocking of the actors is actually pretty simple. It has to be on a sitcom. There's not a whole lot of crazy motion going on. I think it was 3 cameras. But the cameras are moving like crazy. You got this one camera just pushes in, and it's like, oh, okay, so here comes Lilith through the door. And the second that they got that shot, this guy just hauls this thing back and rotates it around, and he's getting ready for Cliff to come out of the bathroom. The blocking for the cameras was crazy tough. And when I watched the live show, and if you've ever been to, it doesn't have to be Cheers, if you've ever been to a sitcom, you realize that they probably can go 4 or 5 minutes without some kind of mistake. and then they'll just do that. They'll just pick up the play from that point. They never ever go backwards. That's another handicap, by the way. Obviously, if you've got a show like Cheers, you would shoot all of the stuff in Sam's office first, and then you'd move the cameras over to the bar, right? But you can't do it that way. If an audience has to see the bar, Sam's office, then back to the bar again. They'll wait a little bit, but they can't wait too long. They can't let them cool down. So Desi Arnaz just figured it all out. And one of the things that Desi did to figure it out was he kept that set simple. That I Love Lucy, with obviously a few exceptions, and some of them being classics like the Chocolate Assembly Line. But that entire show is the most popular show in television. You could make a case it was the most popular show in history ever in terms of audience share. That show happens in that living room. It just happens in the living room. And same for Cheers. And same for Friends. Friends happens in the apartment and to some degree at the cafe. So it's amazing what you can do when you understand that. And as somebody pointed out, I was going to close with this, Desilu Productions not only produced Star Trek, they produced a bunch of really great and daring stuff. Desilu Studios was the SpaceX of entertainment. They really took big risks. And yeah. Now here's something that's a little darker on that. If you watch I Love Lucy, when Ricky gets mad, Lucy physically cringes, like this. Now that may be her just acting that out, but watching it today makes me realize, I don't know, she looks like somebody who'd been smacked around a bit, and it's not a pretty thing to watch, and that was just different times. Men were more willing to do that. And I suppose Latin men probably even more willing to do it just as a general sample. So there's a lot of times when you see Lucy reacting to Ricky Ricardo being angry, and it's not like a cringe. It's a flinch. And I suspect there was some of that going on, but I don't know. I just noticed that when I watched it as an adult, it seems kind of obvious. So there you go. Only 45-minute answer to the first question. So there we go. Fantastic. Okay, let's see. Eli Noor, do you still read Lilacs? Eli, I mentioned Lilacs obviously in the AI episode. I don't know if it survived the cut down, but I talked about him a lot in there. That whole last week is kind of a blur. I said that James Lilacs is he's an absolute genius, and his take on things. That's the first blog I ever read was Lilacs, ever. The Institute of Official Cheer just caught me. It caught me because James and I are about the same age, and we went through the same things. And when he's bringing back stuff from his childhood, he's bringing back my stuff too. But his take on things is utterly unique. I don't think there's anybody out there at all that has the kind of light touch that Lilacs has. James Lilacs is able to dissect things gently. That's about the best way I can put it. I've never heard him or seen him mean or angry. I'm not saying he doesn't get that way, but it doesn't show up in his writing. And that's not something I can say for myself or really just about anybody else. He just has such a sympathetic take on the past. He did a matchbook collection thing, just matchbooks. People smoked all the time, so they were, you go to a bar, or you go to a hotel, and you had cardboard matchbooks with the name of the hotel on it. It was pretty effective advertising. And Lilacs has a collection of these. He's got collections of postcards, all the rest of it. So he was doing his favorite matchbooks, and he would write them he would write the one or two paragraphs on each one of these little matchbooks as if he were the guy selling the matchbook. He would, if you had a green matchbook cover, green cardboard with a black ink and a stock, 1940s image of some sexy silhouette of some woman like leaning back or something like that. And he would say things like, yeah, got him to go for this thing, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get him to get the second color. But if this thing had been in red, that would have been a real classic, but he just didn't want to pay for it, that kind of thing. I just thought, wow, it's amazing. And he's just astonishing. He's so American. And when the thing that put the hook into me, it's still up there, is this is just what got me started not only on Lilacs, but on blogs. It got me into blogs. Lilacs.com has a number of different sections in it, and one of them he writes every day. Like I said, he's a professional writer. I just write for money. So he gets up every day and writes his articles every single day. But he's got a website called the Institute of Official Cheer, which is in itself a magnificent piece of writing. And in the very, very, very many things that are there, I've read every single page of the Institute of Official Cheer several times. But the one thing that really did it for me is what he did on a restaurant hotel called the Gobbler, which was a real place. I want to say it was in Wisconsin. And this thing was done just as the cool 60s, the early 60s were turning into the hippie 60s, which then led to the atrocities of the 70s. So everything in the Gobbler was electric blue shag carpeting on the walls. And his description of these things and how you would feel in the room, it's just, I don't know how he does it. His eye for details, unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And he would point out something like, sitting here on this round bed, sure is. Of course, I can't see the TV that's in the picture here. If you look at the picture, you see that you can't see the TV from the bed, but anyway, it looks good in the promotional picture. That kind of thing. The grooviest motel in Wisconsin, Dave Big Booty says, yeah, the Gobbler. And the pictures are all from flyers or from promotional material. So these are pictures taken by the Gobbler's marketing staff, which is probably the son-in-law. So these are the official pictures. And the people are so, it's like it's filled with people who are in their late 50s or early 60s in 1968 or 9. And they always are wearing the same kind of polyester American. They're just so, hard to say. It's not really, he's making fun of them, but he's not mocking them. I don't know how else to describe it. He's having fun with them, but he's not mocking them. He's not mean. Anyway, yeah. So I don't read Lilacs as much as I should. If I did, I'd be a much calmer person. I don't know how he does it, but he does it. He does it consistently. He manages to find this tone, this perfect pitch to describe just about anything. And I just admire him enormously. I met him twice. I spent a couple hours with him once when I was in his town. And that was fun. A lot of fun. All right, moving on. Eric Blake, hey, look at this. Eric Blake's with a question, and it's 7 lines. How about that? Traditional greetings from Vectron and so on. Now imagine, if you will, a certain series, very recent, centered around a certain popular character in a certain franchise. Imagine that episode 3 of this series can best be described premise-wise as said protagonist as Curtis Sliwa. I'm not making this up. Upon seeing this episode, I was struck by the similarities to the founding of the Guardian Angels, and yes, the series goes on to show it's a good thing. Have I piqued your interest? I will tell you the series title in the chat. Ooh, I love adventures like this. Okay, what is it? What series is it? Eric, I'm teed up and waiting. In fact, I'm watching both streams now for the answer, because this is kind of like one of those what do they call it? Advent calendars. You open little windows, days leading up to Christmas. James is Midwestern. That's it. You got it absolutely right, J.B. Coulter. That's it. He's Midwestern. I was at when the Tea Party first started. This would be 2009, I want to say. I got invited to speak at the Capitol in Indianapolis, and then I got invited to speak on the steps of the Capitol in Minnesota in the winter. And I went out there with intent to look sharp. So I'm on the steps of the Capitol, and I'm wearing my suit, my tie, and my shirt, and I've got an undershirt, and happen to be wearing underpants that day too. So I'm just dressed in a cotton suit, and I was so cold. Chicks on the right are great too. Yes, they were. I saw them in Indianapolis as well. I was so cold. I didn't say a word. And I bet you 7 people came up to me. I think it was like 7 people. Just walked up to me, never seen them before in my life, and said, "Hey, you seem a little cold. I've got an extra coat in my car. I could just go get you the coat. You want the coat?" "Oh, no, I'm fine, thanks." "Well, there's a Sears over there. We could just take you over to Sears and get yourself a coat if you want." I just thought, these people are just so nice. They're just so damn nice. So Eric says that the question, the series in question is the Book of Boba Fett, and I Eric writes, "I swear if Bill forgets to look at my answer in the chat because he saw a squirrel on the YouTube chat." Saw a squirrel in the chat is, again, Eric, you're just out of the park. That's what I do. I'm on a subject and I'll see a squirrel. That's perfect. It's a perfect description. I can't go any further on the Book of Boba Fett because I haven't seen the Book of Boba Fett. But Curtis Lewa is a hero of mine. And to think that he was running for mayor of New York City, it would have been a whole different town. I talk about him quite a lot for a while there. Curtis Lewa, really exceptional guy. Founder of the Guardian Angels, and he was basically using criminals he took, in the mid to late 70s, the New York subway was unrideable. In those days, my dad was wrapping up his career in New York in those days, and he said, you cannot go past this street. You can't go here after this hour. He just said, I was probably 17 or 20 or 18, 19, somewhere there in New York. And if you went down to the subway, people would carry $20 bills in their pockets, in their front pockets, to give to the muggers so they didn't get hurt. It was just a racket. I mean, you're just getting mugged all the time. All of the subways were covered in graffiti. I mean, just you really need to see some pictures of it. In fact, I'll show you. And it was appalling, and it was dangerous. And the Democratic mayor said, "Well, there's nothing we can do about that. It's just the way it is." And before the people in New York took a wild risk and voted in Rudy Giuliani, who turned New York City from a jungle into Disneyland for the better part of 15 years. The only law that was out there was Curtis Lewa. Let me see if I can find this, just a picture here. Yeah, this is actually the picture I had in mind. I got 2 of them here. It's really worth seeing, that one. And yep, this was the primary, the center of the world, New York City. This is what the subway looked like when Curtis Lewa got there. Oh boy. That's bigger than, hang on. Or isn't that nice? And when Rudy Giuliani and Bill Braxton got there, they said, we got to clean up the subways. And the people working for the subway said, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, 1/3 of the cars are just not operational, and 2/3 of the other cars have problems where some doors won't open. And we can't do a thing about the graffiti. It's just no way to get rid of it. So you're just going to have to work around that. And Giuliani and Braxton said, no, they're all going to work, and they're all going to be clean. And they said it couldn't be done. So he did it. And that's where, from that point on, that's the broken windows policy. If you let small crimes go unpunished, like people pissing on the side of a building or something like that, then it becomes a signal that this is a lawless zone. Broken windows means you can do whatever you want to there. So once he started cracking down on the small crimes, the big crime realized, hey, it's time to go someplace else. Anyway, so when these subways were just murder and mugging pits, Sliwa was working at a McDonald's, and he was in the subway, and he just got sick of it. And he saw a bunch of these guys doing this mugging, and he followed him. He just followed him. And unarmed, he walked into of this gang's headquarters and basically started lecturing these people and telling them that this was beneath them. He said, you're young men, you're supposed to protect these people, you're not supposed to prey on them. And that got their attention. And he was threatened, obviously, get out of here before we kill you, that kind of thing. He just stuck it out, man. And basically, it's not even that he shamed them into it, he inspired them into it. Sliwa basically took the people that were doing the mugging and turned them into the people that stopped the mugging. And that's a very important point. It's not like Sliwa found a bunch of good guys and put them in the subways to unarmed to guard the subways. It's that Sliwa took the bad guys and treated them as a father figure, which they didn't have. And he simply, that sounds great, Chris. He simply challenged them. So he goes in there and says, you can't do this. You just can't. You cannot beat up little old ladies and take their money. And these guys basically said, well, that's how we buy our drugs and make a living, and that's how we buy our hamburgers too. So, what do you want us to do? What are you going to give us in exchange if we go down there and start patrolling these things? And he said, you get a cap and you get a T-shirt. Not a cap, they got a beret. That's an important distinction, by the way. And what they found was not what Curtis found, because Curtis knew what he was doing. What these young men found, these predators, yeah. What they found was that when they went down there, obviously it takes a couple months for this to really spread, but you've got these people who look exactly like the muggers because that's what they used to be. And now whenever a train comes into a station, there's two of these guys, one on either side of each door on the subway, standing essentially at attention with their arms crossed, daring somebody to start mugging somebody or something. And these little old ladies who used to look at them in terror now look up at them and say, thank you, thank you. And this is the first positive affirmation that these guys have ever had in their lives. And it worked like magic. It just stopped. It just stopped because this one guy had the guts to go in there and do it. And to think that this guy could have also been mayor of New York, he got voted down not by the people who are suffering from crime, but by, I guarantee, the people who live in high crime neighborhoods voted for Curtis Sliwa. The people who elected the current mayor are the liberals, white liberals in the skyscrapers who never have to deal with this stuff. Eric says Frank Miller also used Curtis Sliwa's story for Batman in The Dark Knight Returns. So Curtis Sliwa is great. Now, I can't comment on Book of Boba Fett because I haven't seen it, but if it's anything like the Sliwa story, obviously that's one of my all-time favorites. Ian Nolan. Bill, just a thought for your Major Mace Mattingly, I think, show idea. Consider what type of reactor is actually powering this whole thing. The original thorium molten salt reactor was actually prototyped as part of the aircraft nuclear reactor program back in the early 1960s. Ian, if I had a gold star to hand out, I would pin it to the screen right now. J.B. Coulter with a big line here. She says, they got a beret, a T-shirt, and dignity, yes, and respect which they earned, yes. That's exactly what they got. They got dignity, they got self-respect, they got positive affirmation, and he appealed to the men in them, and there were some girls too. He said, "Be a man, do the right thing," and not all of them did, obviously, but enough of them did, and they just changed all their lives. And not just the lives of the people riding the subway, the people who became guardian angels. Those people went on to become pillars of society. He's a frickin' hero. Should be a gigantic statue to him in every city in the world. So anyway, back to that question. Yes. When we were talking about this, I was saying, "Oh, do you want to see the power source, the reactor room?" And they open up, and Chris Goodwin there says he started modeling a reactor in Blender for fun. So can't wait to see that link. But what they were doing in the 50s and 60s. So you had a nuclear weapon deployed in 1945. Manhattan Project is working from about 1943, I want to say, maybe a little bit later. But the first operational reactor was it Fermi? It was at the University of Chicago. They basically took something that looked like a kiln, surrounded it with these lead bricks, put uranium in there, and it was the first controlled chain reaction. And for pretty much all of the 50s, the atoms were your friend. In fact, there was a 16 millimeter film called Mr. Atom is Your Friend, something like that. And atomic power was just going to be endless free power for everybody, which is what it can be, and in fact is, if you treat it with respect and you're not a hysteric about it. Was it graphite? Thank you, Astronaut. I learned a lot from these things. So by the time you get to the mid 50s, late 50s, early 60s, people are saying, well, damn, why don't we just use this stuff forever? So obviously nuclear submarines were not only a success, they were the breakout success. They're the single most important weapon in the world today. Ever since they put missiles on submarines, nuclear submarines, that's the weapon. But there were plans for nuclear-powered cars. My entire studio here is covered with the work of Sid Mead. There's Sid Mead, futurist. Sid Mead was illustrator for General Motors in the early 60s. And everything in Sid Mead's world is clean and elegant and fast and fun. That's why I love him so much. That's why I decorated this whole office with either Star Trek or Sid Mead. So that's the early 60s. That is something I need to remember, because this is what the guys on the moon are going to have with them, this world. So they were talking about building nuclear automobiles, and they did have designs for a nuclear airplane. You say, well, how the hell does a nuclear airplane work? To be perfectly honest with you, I don't remember, but I imagine it was driving a propeller or some kind of turbine, because if you've got something hot over here and not hot over there, you can make anything happen, right? That's all it is. This is hot, this isn't. You're going to get power out of that. So they were everywhere. And I look at this now. I look at this world now. And part of me wants to say, oh, how naive we were. But a bigger part of me wants to say, how close did we come to getting on that train? Because now when I think about a nuclear-powered car, I don't think about accidents. I don't think about nuclear waste or anything. I think about terrorism. That's what I think about. And when did that enter the mix? You know? I mean, I know when I watched it happen, but you've got this nuclear future where everybody is prosperous because there's endless abundant energy. And there are no terrorists because this whole world is Western. It's the future. It's the future. And I guess we just didn't count on the weight of the entropy, that we have to carry all the time. Um, just really, really close. There are, again, they're talking about using a nuclear rocket to go to Mars. I think that's a good idea considering we built 23 of them or whatever the number was in the late 60s into about 1967, 68 to about 70, 71, somewhere in there. Project Nerva, we built 20 something nuclear rocket engines. They are the simplest mechanical things to build of all time. Honestly, I don't think there's anything simpler to build than a nuclear rocket engine. It's astonishing how simple that is. It's just it's a giant cylinder of uranium with channels that liquid hydrogen walks through, and it just gets really hot in there and shoots out the back. There's no turbines, there's no bearings, there's no rotors, there's no nothing. There's no fuel pumps, nothing. It's just super simple. And it's got twice the efficiency of the space shuttle engines, at least twice. Nope, can't do it because people will have conniption fits. We've let the world be determined by the most crazy and the most leashed by the most neurotic elements of our society. We don't do what we should have done and what we used to do, which is tell them to pound sand and make them ashamed of themselves. Now we actually kowtow to them. And when Cassini went to Saturn, you can use solar power probably out to Mars. I think solar power is absurd, even especially on space vehicles. But you can power a battery with a trickle charge out to Mars. By the time you get to Jupiter, there's just not enough sunlight, and certainly not at Saturn. So the Jupiter missions had a very simple form of reactor called an RTG, a radiothermal generator. It's basically just a little piece of uranium that just stays hot, and they cycle, liquid around it, and basically powers a steam turbine, I guess. I don't know how they convert it into electricity, but it's essentially just a hot piece of uranium out on a pole. And when they launched Cassini, I remember there was hysteria, people chaining themselves to the launch site and throwing themselves down in front of the trucks, kind of thing, because they didn't want to launch what they called the Cassini warhead, that this thing's going to be carrying nuclear materials up into space, and what happens if it explodes? And the radiation comes out, It's like, you people, just honestly. You get this again, yeah, James Baranowski says nobody's going to let them launch a Nerva engine. It's too dangerous during a launch failure. It can be made safe, That's not a terribly difficult thing to do. You can't make a whole vehicle, can't build a vehicle that will survive an explosion because the vehicle weighs more than your thrust. But you can certainly design a part of it that is essentially indestructible. Black boxes, which of course are orange, are essentially indestructible. I'm certainly not aware of very many cases where the black box was mulched, unusable. So you could certainly do it safely. And again, it's like, is it 100% safe? No, nothing is 100% safe. Nothing is safe. There are things that are relatively safer than other things, but safety is not a thing. When people say, well, they have a right to return home without being, no, they don't. No. This life doesn't give you a warranty. You don't have a warranty. You're not guaranteed not to get sick or hit by a bus or killed in a school shooting, some lunatic. You just should be grateful that the number of chances to die are so much lower than anybody else has ever lived before you. You should be just on your knees grateful. But we saw this with COVID, where ideas like titration and concentration of viruses and people wearing masks outdoors. Totally 100% unaware of how absurd that is, and how once you take a breath outdoors, the dispersal of that virus essentially becomes infinitesimal, right? You can't catch a virus from somebody who's 10 feet in front of you breathing outside. Just no, you got to have a certain concentration, like somebody breathing in your face or in a small room or something. So just all of this stuff. It's just plain emotional hysteria. And we've got an entire society that is just now filled with people who are afraid of everything. Thank you very much for that, Kaladin. It's infantile to think that you are entitled to safety. It's not to say you shouldn't be aiming for safety. One of the things I'm most proud of in this society is pushing 22 years now, 23, 22 years, without a single crash of a jet airliner in the United States. That's 40,000 flights a day for 22 years. And we haven't broken one. We haven't had a fatality anyway. And actually, you can thank Scully for keeping that record going. So it's life gets safer and safer and safer, and as it does, we as a society become more and more and more scared. I don't know, it's just really, really tough. It's tough to watch. By the way, this is a somewhat related story to the safety cult. But there's some compelling evidence that we're getting pretty close to figuring out how to undo aging. It is a biological process that aging is a result of copying errors. And what I did not know until relatively recently, I knew that aging happens because the copies of the cells become copies of copies of copies, and the information degrades. So if you take a typed paper and you put it in a Xerox machine, copier, you're going to get something that looks almost exactly like that. You take that copy and put that in the Xerox machine and copy that, and if you do that 5 times, you end up with nothing but garbage. Because once those errors start to creep in, they get magnified and so on. So that's what happens with aging. Your cells just get less precise. Replicative fading. Thank you for that, P7 2017. I've never heard the term before, but that's clearly what it is. So the signal, the information gets degraded. Now, I thought that happened to all the cells. But what I've learned since then is no, it's not that your body's not making any young cells. It's just that the older cells are in the way. It's basically a clogging of the drain problem. That these older cells these damaged cells are not getting out of the way. You're still making young person cells. And the part of the gene that's got to do with this called the telomeres, is tips of the chromosomes, I think. And the longer they are, the more intact the information is. So anyway, here it's just talking about safety. So here's something to think about. So just for a thought experiment, because thought experiments are fun. What if there was an over-the-counter $1 a dose anti-aging drug, widely available to everybody at a reasonable price? So not only would you not age, but with this technology, you would pretty soon return to 21 years old or something like that, whatever the biological peak is. Let's just say that's there. Let's say that we have essentially, for the sake of the argument, pretty near immortality, hundreds and hundreds of years of life anyway. The question is, would you take the kind of risks that you take today if you had a chance to live forever or nearly forever? That's an interesting question to me. Because, when you are mortal, and you do something dangerous, it's like, well, I might cut the next, 8 years off of my life, but it's only 8 years. What if you had a chance to really like live essentially forever, and the stakes are much higher now? Would you take the kind of risks that you take today? And when I say kind of risks, I'm not talking about hang gliding. I mean, would you ride in an automobile, or what? What would you do? The stakes are much higher now. An accident, essentially, for the sake of the argument, what we're saying is, given our advancing state of technology, not wisdom, but knowledge, it is not inconceivable that death from disease and aging would be exterminated. It just wouldn't exist anymore. But accidents will still kill you, and so will murder. So, Steve Whoop just beat me to it. Do you give up your motorcycle if you could live forever? I don't know. I don't know. I'll tell you one thing though. Real Swamp, which says, I bet you would get tired of living. I think you're probably right. But I'm not at that point yet. What I will say is, I think every single day as I get older, I realize that I just turned 64. I'm just now starting to figure this stuff out. You know? Martin Vorbrot says, as a father of two, no, just no. This youth is wasted on the young thing is one of the most true things ever. It's like, I'm just now figuring out how to do all this stuff, and I've got 20 years left unless something happens. And that's becoming something that I'm more and more aware of, and that is that, you gotta get this thing moving, man. You're not gonna be here forever. But what if you were gonna be here forever? Essentially forever. I wouldn't want to live forever, but I wouldn't mind seeing 200. That just because I'm curious. I'm just curious. If I lived to be 200 years old right now, I would like to see. I'd like to get a ticket to Mars. That'd be fun. I'd like to see a probe come back from Alpha Centauri or something. Now, Lockwood Thexton here says, no way in hell I would want to live another 50 years. I'm 52, even if I was in perfect health. Just know I'm ready to go right now. Well, I'll tell you, honestly, Lockwood, that is the attitude. I'm not being sarcastic here at all. That ready to go right now is the secret to contented life, I think. It happened to me when I was 30. Incredible flying experience, and I just said, okay, well, I did this, so if I'd done this, then that's not a bad run. So I would certainly like to do it. And if this does happen, by the way, of course the people will die, but this could very well be the last generation to die out. Which is kind of annoying. Be fun to see. All right, let's see what else we got. And then I'm going to have to go back to the notes and get on this other thing to get this Cold War thing out the door and finished. What was that? Somebody's jaw just dropped? Twitch just dropped. Oh, yeah, we're having problems with Twitch tonight. All right, we do one more here. Chris Taylor. Yep. It's going to do Chris Taylor. I'm going to answer this question real fast from Bob Knife, and then I'll do the one up above it. I'm watching the Cold War series. I'd already listened to it 3 times, and I have a question. Why did the video guys use tiny little squares on the TV screens used to represent the old TVs instead of the classic horizontal lines like black and white TVs actually had? Seems that would have been more authentic with the horizontal lines. Again, love the series. Bob, I'm experiencing a tremendous sense of regret here. It bothered me the first time I saw it too. And I should have said something about it. I just didn't. I just remember thinking, that's an odd choice. I know what they're going for. It's an odd choice. If you haven't seen the Cold War series, there's lots and lots of things that they put on this little black and white TV screen, which is a great, 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 great device. And they degrade the video, so they make it black and white, and they use little squares. But that's not how TV worked. It worked with lines. And Bob, you're saying, why did they make that decision? They didn't make that decision. They have no idea what the TV looked like. I'm not trying to trash anybody, but the reason why I've done 250 notes on one episode is because the editors just don't know. They don't know the difference between World War I footage and Korean War footage. They just can't tell. And that's really tough. And the reason I have such regrets about it is that TV thing bothered me from the beginning. But once the first episode was out, then that's that. But yes, that absolutely should have been scan lines. I know exactly how that should have looked. And that's how it's going to look on Major Mace Mattingly. The black and white TV is going to look like black and white TVs. They'll say, "You want to go and watch this on a big screen?" I said, "Yeah." You go into the next room, and the big screen will be, that's a big screen TV. They'll have a color TV. It'll probably be a Quasar, bum 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 bum, by Motorola, but early color TV for me is as close to magic as I get. Growing up in Bermuda, we had two stations broadcast from 3 in the afternoon to 11 at night, and they were both black and white TVs. And I always loved the annual trip back to America from Bermuda. I loved staying with my cousins, and we're so close to that part of the family, and loved the big toy stores, loved everything about it. So it was always a highlight of the year for me. And somewhere around 1964 or so, somewhere in that general ballpark, 64, 65, when I was 6 or 7, I came and visited my cousin's family, my Aunt Marty and Uncle Rock. And I have an Uncle Rock. How cool is that? And an Aunt Marty, too. And suddenly they had this color TV. And I sat there in front of this thing. I couldn't believe my eyes. And first generation color TVs are magic for me because the programming at the time said, well, the following show is brought to you in living color on NBC. And so if you got a color TV, you want to see some damn colors, right? That's why Star Trek, the original series, looks so beautiful. That's why it looks so beautiful. Because if Star Trek had come out 1 year earlier, it would have been a black and white season. I'm pretty sure 1 year earlier would have done it. Certainly 2 years earlier. Gilligan's Island first season's in black and white. And I think the first season of Bewitched is in black and white. I know the first season of Wild Wild West is in black and white. But when color came out, the TV manufacturers, American TV manufacturers like Motorola and Magnavox and those guys, said, we'd like to have something colorful to show. So if you look at Star Trek, the original series, that's why the uniforms are red and blue. Yeah, first season of Lost in Space. That's right, exactly. Why did I think of that, JB? Exactly. Bonanza as well. So when Star Trek first came out, if you look at the original series, all of the colors are just super saturated. That red, that engineered red, is as red gets. It's so red. The blue's a little bit of lighter blue, but it's blue. But the main thing that they did with that is, you look at the skies on the planet when they go down to their little set, and they're fighting the rock monster or whatever. The skies are purple and they're green, and the lighting on board, like in Kirk's cabin, it's just so much color there. It's just beautiful, beautiful stuff, beautiful. And of all the things that I liked about Star Trek Continues, the Vic Mignogna thing, he captured the lighting of Star Trek perfectly. Beverly Hillbillies, yes, a bunch of them. Combat, I remember Combat. I love Combat. My dad loved Combat because those were his guys. Bayonets, those animated bayonets, and that was I'm not going to look because people are going to. I'm going to get this on my own. So, oh my God, Vic Morrow was it? I think it was Vic Morrow, the star of Combat. He was killed on a movie set because the director wanted bigger explosions against the advice of the safety people. He should have gone to jail on the Twilight Zone thing. John Landis should be in jail because it wasn't an accident. It wasn't like, oh, wow, we used too much explosive. They did a couple of takes of that. For those of you not familiar with the story, they made the Twilight Zone movie, I want to say it was around 1980, somewhere around there. And they did 4 episodes, little mini, so it was basically 4 movies, 4 half-hour movies. Mersh says died in a helicopter crash. He did die in a helicopter crash, but he wasn't in the helicopter. The helicopter landed on top of him. So the John Landis is shooting the scene where you've got Vic Morrow's playing an older guy, Greatest Generation guy, because that's what he was. He was that age, and he's a real bigot, and he hates Asians, and he hates Vietnamese, and then he's stuck in the way the Twilight Zone does that. He's stuck in Vietnam, and he has to get out, and he ends up trying to save these 2 Vietnamese kids who were there illegally, the actors. They were not supposed to be working late at night. They were not supposed to be working in dangerous circumstances, but Landis said, no, we need the shot. So they did the first take of this thing, and the shot is Vic Morrow's got a young child, 4, 5, 6 years old, one under each arm. He's wading through waist-deep water as American helicopters attack this Vietnamese village, and he's on the side of the Vietnamese now. This is his big lesson in racism. And they had a real Huey with an expert pilot, and the helicopter's supposed to come in, and there's an explosion, and the safety guy said, well, I don't know, this is a little tough. Landis said, well, let's do it. So they did it, and Landis said, we need a bigger explosion, much bigger. And the helicopter pilot came in and said, no, this last one I was just barely able to control this thing. Well, we're going to do it anyway. I don't know whether he told the helicopter pilot, but he put in a much larger charge. And so he got a shot, and the helicopter comes in, and as the helicopter's coming in, this giant gasoline explosion pops up. The updraft, needless to say, the fireball basically knocks the helicopter out of control. The pilot can't save it, and it goes into the water, and the rotor blades just decapitated them. Just all 3 of them, just instantly killed. They never knew what hit them. And Landis overrode his safety people. He overrode the rules, the laws. He just plain did it. It was late at night. He wanted the shot, and he thought he'd get away with it. So 3 people died. And it wasn't just negligence. It was actual malfeasance. Negligence is, you should have checked to see whether that explosion was going to be that dangerous. Malfeasance is when you know it's dangerous and you say, I want a bigger one. Well, we can't do that. Well, do it, or else you're fired. So he, and then he got to the, there was a hearing, and he cried, and then he went to the funerals of these kids uninvited, and he said or wrote something that was so cringeworthy, just so awful. And I really, not a fan. He and Spielberg were very close friends, and after that, they never spoke to each other. Spielberg never spoke to him again. He just plain murdered those people, really. So anyway, yeah, Dwayne Cates says he just weaseled out of it. That's exactly what he did. He weaseled out of it, and he was a famous director. He directed some big hits. I think didn't he do American Werewolf in London? And if you're a celebrity in Los Angeles, you pretty much get to walk around and do whatever you want to. Anyway, yeah, that was something else. There were rumors at the time. I remember I was old enough to be in the movie business at the very, very, very beginning of my career. I just made these 16 millimeter films, so I was up on everything that happened in the movie business. And there were reports that Spielberg was actually on the set that night, and that when this thing exploded and they found out what happened, he was whisked away. But I don't believe that. I don't think he was there. I wish I'd fixed that TV thing though, Bob. I really do. I wish I'd fixed that, because it bothered me too. I just seem to remember that when I finally saw it, it was too late. But I should have just said, "No, guys, really." They just didn't know. They'd never seen it, so they didn't know. I think it'll do it. I'm starting to get my voice a little creaky, and I've still got several hours of notes to do. It's 8:15 here, and been up since about 3:30. Yeah. So, yeah. I don't really know what to add to that. There's Bob. That was a great question. So anyway, there's a big discussion now in the YouTube chat about whether or not Alec Baldwin should be in jail and whether it was his fault or not. And some parties are saying it was the armorer's fault, and other parties are saying it was Alec Baldwin's fault. Not a fan of Alec Baldwin. I love his work. But there should never have been live bullets on the set. However, I can tell you one thing. In movies, when you're shooting movies, whenever you see people shoot at each other, like in a gunfight, like a Western, they're never shooting at each other, even if they have prop guns. It's just a rule. There's no way for you to tell. You're looking at a flat plane, so if I've got a gun on you like this, right here, like that, I'm always going to aim off to the side, but you will never know that from the camera angle. You never, ever, ever, even on a movie set, aimed a gun directly at somebody and pulled the trigger. It just didn't do it. You always aimed off to the side, and you aimed to a side where the camera couldn't see what you were doing. There's no way to tell. But every time you've ever seen people shoot at each other in a movie, they're not actually aiming at each other. They're aiming several feet off to one side or another, because that's the final, safety check is, okay. I cannot imagine pointing a gun at somebody and pulling the trigger unless I wanted to kill them. I just can't imagine it. You could say, I mean, I could inspect the round, all of it. The reason I couldn't do it is because there's no reason to do it, right? There's no reason to do it. It doesn't matter. It was the wadding that killed the crow. Just mentioned his name. I forgot. It just left me. Lee. Brandon Lee. Yeah. I think he was pretending to suicide thing, right? That's what I think I heard. So he knew he had blanks in there. And so he basically said, "Oh," and thought it'd be hilarious because the gun would go off, and he knew that there were no bullets there. But there wasn't a bullet, but the wadding was there, and the temple is the thinnest part of the skull, and it just plain killed him. Oh no, I got that wrong. It's somebody else. People are saying nope. There's another actor who shot him. Anyway, my point is, I still don't. You can't have. I almost said you can't have too much safety. That's ridiculous. By the way, let me just get this out of my system, just because I just saw it. One of the people I have the most contempt for in this society, and every time I get a new data point, I have more and more contempt for him, and that is Neil deGrasse Tyson. I saw him in an interview not too long ago where they were questioning the COVID response, and the person who was interviewing him said, "Here are 6 experts. These are top people in the field, including the person who came up with RNA therapies in the first place. These 6 leading experts, among others, never got to have their opinion, and that's not science." And Neil deGrasse Tyson says, no, of course it's science. Science is about a consensus. there was a consensus about how to treat the virus, and science is consensus. Science is the opposite of consensus, you idiot. It's precisely the opposite of consensus. The consensus was the Earth is the center of the universe. You stupid bastard. And I've heard him say things that sound. I always, every time I listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson, I listen to a guy with a mid-level IQ trying to sound like Carl Sagan. He's an absolute doofus. I saw a quote from him that said, if aliens ever came to this solar system, they would not stop at Earth because Earth is just another planet. They'd stop and look at Saturn, but they wouldn't stop at Earth because Earth is there's just so many billions and billions and billions of Earth. And I thought, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life, ever. And he said this a couple of years ago at the most, right? We know how rare these things are. Oh, so he either doesn't know any astronomy, or more likely, he's just got that left wing kind of humanity is just a cancer, and we're just another biological speck, and there's billions and billions of them, and we're the killer apes, and and I heard this woman who I have very mixed feelings about. It's this woman who does this YouTube channel, German woman, talks a lot about math and science. She used to be good, but now she's trying to be funny. And she was talking about faster than light travel, or faster than light messaging lately. And she just went down that same lazy road. It's like, why haven't we heard any messages from aliens? It's probably because they think that we're too stupid. They just ignore us. They probably hear our messages, but they think that we're so stupid, they just plain ignore us. Really? Really? So when scientists go into the Amazon, Sabine, yeah. When people go into the Amazon to make contact with primitive people there, they don't go because they can't learn anything from these people because they're so primitive. Is that what you're saying? We're just so stupid. We're so stupid. We're so awful. Get off this planet. Get off. And Sagan, I worship Sagan. I worshipped him growing up. I read every single one of his books. I absolutely worship him. But he was really responsible for a lot of this. This overemphasizing the size of everything, and it seemed like Sagan spent his entire career trying to get people away from thinking in an Earth-centered fashion. And what he ended up doing was getting people in a place where they have no respect or appreciation for how unique this world is. And unfortunately, I remember reading his baloney detection kit, and I thought, man, this is just brilliant. Yeah, Michio Kaku, he's a lunatic too. And Sagan was talking about all these ways that you can detect BS, and then he applies it in astronomy. He did a takedown of Velikovsky, Worlds in Collision. Velikovsky believes that Venus was ejected from Jupiter, and that the whole solar system is set up because of these ancient collisions that just knock things like billiard balls out of the way. Sagan basically did the calculations for the amount of energy it would take, and so on and so on and so on. And he said, work like this hones the mind for useful work. I thought, great, this guy's awesome. But he didn't use his baloney detection kit on his own politics. And he openly knew that when he was on The Tonight Show talking about nuclear winter and the end of the world, he later admitted that he knew that this was not real, but that he thought it was so important that people be scared of nuclear weapons that he lied about nuclear winter as if an H-bomb is not worrisome enough. He just plain lied. He knew it. But he lied for the right reasons. See, he lied for the right reasons. He kept the truth, the scientific truth, from people, not only kept it from them, but basically put his entire prestige on getting people to believe something that he knew not to be true because he thought he knew better than anybody else. And this is why some of the smartest people in the world are some of the dumbest people that ever walked this planet. But at least Sagan was a genuine thinker and a really good writer, and popularized astronomy in a way that nobody has. And I worked for a guy who you could arguably make the case was the number two guy. Jack Horkheimer is a long way behind Carl Sagan in terms of gravitas and credibility, but in terms of getting astronomy in front of people, I don't know if there's anybody in between in that gap. But Sagan was something. Neil deGrasse Tyson is he's just, the problem with Tyson is that he's not only not very smart, he feels like he has to constantly be saying brilliant things. And I can understand that kind of pressure in terms of that's his brand. But he just doesn't have the chops for it. And he just ends up saying, when he gets off a script, he says stupid things like, if aliens came, they would never visit the Earth. Earth is boring. Why would they visit the Earth? They'd go look at Saturn. Really? Really? We've discovered a planet, by the way, an exoplanet. I'm not making this up. It sounds too incredible to be true, but there is a planet whose ring system extends. It's honest to God. It is like from here to the orbit of Venus. It is beyond. It's a BB in an enormous ring system. Oh no, come and see Saturn. You idiot. Come and see Saturn. Well, over there you've got liquid water and oxygen in the atmosphere. You're going to come and look at some ice rings, and then you're going to take off. You're just going to ignore that pale blue dot that you like to talk about. Just one pixel on this image from the Voyager thing. Everything that we are and everything that we've lived. We're just one little pixel. We're one little blue pixel on this infinite tapestry of the cosmos. This is exactly, precisely what led to Nazism. There, I did it. I just invoked whatever that first person who used Nazi loses the argument thing. But that's basically it. You look at, and I owe this to Jack Horkheimer. I owe this to the genius of Jack Horkheimer as a genius. Star Hustler was the worst thing that Jack Horkheimer ever did in terms of his talent. Godwin's Law. Jack Horkheimer's writing is insanely good. And whenever I watch Star Hustler, I just think, oh, Jack, why are you doing this? Because when Jack Horkheimer was at his peak in 1972, he wrote a planetarium show called Child of the Universe. And when I ran that show, when it came back in 73 or 74, it was a classic, Child of the Universe. It's the most impressive planetarium show ever written. And Jack started that off. You're walking into the planetarium in Miami, Florida in the afternoon, and you get inside the museum and you get your ticket at the box office. You walk in through these heavy doors. You start going around this ambulatory, which is really dark. You got these beautiful black-white posters, which, of course, eventually people started writing on. So they put plastic over them. Then they started scratching the plastic. So then they took them outside and they rotted in the rain. But they stayed pristine for 10 years. Something happened. Anyway, people go inside the planetarium there, and they sit in these 300 seats, 340 seats, something. I think took some out, but you had a room full of 300 people. And the music that's playing is Kurt Weill and Lotte Lenya. It's cabaret music from the 30s. It's the music that was playing in Berlin after World War I had decimated that society, and it is the music that led to the nihilism of the Nazis. It was the music that was so unbearably barren and horribly hostile and cynical, and all of it. It's just terrible. Infidel 42 says, what was your favorite work of Jack's? Long Journey of a Young God by 30 miles is my favorite show of his, by 30 miles. So Lotte Lenya and Kurt Weill wrote a song for Lotte Lenya, this thing called Lost in the Stars. And Jack played that at the beginning of Child of the Universe. He played it. That's the first thing you heard. And we're lost out here in the stars, little stars, big stars, blowing through the night. And we're lost, and we're lost, and we're lost, and we're lost out here in the stars. So that's the whole vibe, right? We're just a speck of dust in the cosmos. And when you think that we're just a speck of dust, then it's amazing how much you will do to that speck of dust in terms of destruction. And Jack played this thing, and his entire point was that we sit in the middle of the universe, that the world out there bigger than us is so much bigger than us. It's very tempting to say that, my God, we're just specks. But then he went the other way and said the world inside us is so vast that we are universes unto ourselves. That you get into the cells and the atoms and all the rest of it. He's just a genius at this. But this Nietzsche kind of nihilistic Sartre existential sort of, I'm evolved enough now, I'm smart enough now to realize that, this thought that we once had that we were something special, that's just plain ego. Just plain ego, and it's also Christian and, Western, hegemonic thinking, and it's chauvinism and all the rest of this stuff. And these midwits parrot this because they think this is the intelligent position to take. They think it's the intelligent position to take. Yeah, Eric says that Tyson is like Bill Nye. He's not an actual scientist. He's an entertainer. He talks about science stuff, which would be fine, except that he and Bill Nye are the voices that people go to when CNN wants something about science. Let's talk to Bill Nye. New comet discovered. Let's talk to Neil deGrasse Tyson. Troy says, Bill, Mr. Horkheimer may have been hard to work for, but he opened my eyes to the grandeur of the solar system after Star Trek. Have you seen the South Park episode about the planetarium? No, I didn't know they did an episode about the planetarium. I had no idea. And I don't mean to bash Jack Horkheimer. On the contrary. I just know that given the depth that man could write to, the first time I saw Star Hustler, I just thought to myself, Jack, this is not... You're doing yourself a disservice by this campy... Horkheimer just loved camp. He just loved it. He just thought camp was just the greatest thing in the world. He just could not stay away from it. But could have knocked me over with a feather when the last time I did... I'm just losing my memory. I swear to God, I need some hydration or something. Mike Rocho. Bill, before we talk about this, you worked for Jack Horkheimer? Yes. He's what turned me on to science and astronomy. He did that for a lot of people. I don't mean to knock him at all. I'm just saying, maybe I'm just incredibly prejudiced against Star Hustler because I knew the man, and Star Hustler. Every time I watch it, it just cringed me out, Greetings, fellow stargazers. It's like, okay, Jack, all right. He's a much deeper guy than that, really. Greetings. And remember to keep looking up. Okay, Jack. Look, man, he is who he is. I'm not criticizing him. On the contrary, I'm saying that he was much, much more than that clown. Much more than that. By the way, I bet you none of you knew this. Here's my bona fides on this. Jack Horkheimer moved to Miami, where he got a job as a writer at the Miami Planetarium. He didn't start out as the director. The director who was there when I got started in '73 was a Cuban gentleman named Rolando Millas. He was a really great guy, and we treated him much worse than we should have. Just because there's a lot of back and forth. So we would make fun of Rolando, and then Rolando would do his Spanish shows on Saturday and Sunday afternoons, and then he'd say, right, Bill? And he'd run in the show. I said, right. But listen now, this is important. So Jack got into the Miami Planetarium, but Jack wasn't from Miami. Jack was from Wisconsin. Jack Horkheimer moved to Miami because his lungs were so bad that they didn't think he'd survive if he stayed in Wisconsin. They thought that the warm, humid air would do him some good, maybe buy him a few extra years. So bought him another 20 or 30 or something. But sit down now, hold on to your socks. Jack Horkheimer did not start out as a writer. Jack Horkheimer was a musician. He was a pianist named Jack Foley. He was a jazz pianist, and he was damn good. And he was... I haven't found a whole lot because I haven't gone digging super deep, but he was a jazz pianist named Jack Foley. It's Jack Foley Horkheimer. And I always was so impressed by that, and I always seem to remember, even I was like 14, I remember thinking, that's got something to do with why he's able to write this well. Um, he when you're, hey, first time chat from PM Brady 50. Used to watch Star Hustler late at night when I was a youngin'. So did a lot of people. He was a superb musician on the piano. And that is raw emotion. There's no, that's just an emotional connection. Um, and I saw a squirrel about Tyson. No, I didn't see a squirrel on that one actually. That one was an internal squirrel. That was a termite. Uh, that was my nickname when I was working at the planetarium, which I wasn't over fond of. But these lovely teeth are courtesy of Dr. Derschlag. When I was young, I had big old round buck teeth, and they called me termite. Now I'm never going to hear the end of this. This was the biggest mistake I've ever made in 350 of these shows. And that's what they called me. Anyway, he was so much. He had just so much more depth and nuance than he played, and I always thought that he sold himself short. But again, again, it was enormously successful. And like I said, the more I think about it, the more I realize this is just my personal prejudice. If I hadn't known the guy, it wouldn't have bothered me so much. And as I recall, was Jack more left-brained or right-brained? He was exclusively right-brained. There was not a left brain. He didn't have a left brain. Uh, he had two right brains. Thank you very much for that, Infidel. So, if I recall correctly, another thing about Star Hustler was I don't believe he ever had a close-up in that show. Maybe he had a mid-shot. I think as time went on, it was just more and more like super wides. Like here I am walking out on the rings of Saturn with, chroma key. The very first show that Jack Horkheimer ever did on public TV, I was in. That's the truth. First time Jack Horkheimer was on WPBT from Miami, I think it was. First time Jack was ever on PBS, which would go on to become Star Hustler. I was on that show. I was probably 14, 15, 16 years old, maybe at the most 16, something like that. It was a special called, and Jack punched it. He used to invite all of the media personality in the city of Miami to come to his parties, and he was always just so much fun and just an entertainer. And so he'd have these incredible press previews, and we'd get the script about, Phil would get the script 9 hours before the people start filing in, and I would get it to run the show live manually. I'd get it as people are filing in. Oh, I just had a chill went through me. I just remember these just sitting there. I'm 15, 16 years old, and all of these glamorous people are coming in and there's champagne and all, and everybody's a little bit tipsy and everybody's having fun, and it's like, here are 35 pages of script that I'm going to have to read in the dark on a little red glowing platform. I'm going to put it down there. We've marked where these cues are supposed to come, but we haven't checked the slides. We don't know if the slides match the cues. We hope they do, but we don't know. And I just remember that pressure, just like, okay, kid, you cannot F this up. You just can't. You can't F it up. And I'm about to run a show. And when I say run a show, I mean of the 250 cues that are in it, every one of them has to be done manually by me. The crossfades, the dissolves have to be done by me. That's a technique. You got to bring the one coming in, has to come up. You can't start taking the big one down, the existing one. You got to the one coming in comes up first, then a certain level, then you take the other one down. And that's just muscle memory skills. So and you got to remember to advance the slides. Dissolve 5 to 6, advance 5, 6 to 5, advance 6. 1 and 2 come up. I never brought up 1 and 2. 1 and 4 come up, and okay, now we bring up 2 and 3. 1 and 4 go down, advance, and all of this stuff. And I'm sitting there in this console, and I'm watching these people file it in, and I've got this piece of paper, a stack of paper in front of me, with these underline 6, underline 3, underline zoom. I got to fly a planet around the room and stuff. And I had not had a chance. I honestly don't think I ran at least 6 of these press previews, and I cannot recall ever having a rehearsal, ever. Not once. Now, it's not to say it didn't happen, but I can't remember it. That is a freaking horrifying feeling. I still have nightmares about that, actually. I have, the actor's nightmare is that you get on stage, you don't remember your lines. It's a horrible feeling. I've had that nightmare a few times. It's terrible. It's a horrifying feeling. I get that occasionally, too. But the planetarium nightmare is real simple. The planetarium nightmare is, I don't know if Phil's watching. He's probably not watching. But we're gonna do constant videos from the road on the Great Boomer road trip. And then I'll edit the whole thing together, and we'll make a lot of fun out of it because we're going to have a blast. But so the Miami Planetarium is like, this is the pinnacle of analog technology. It's just before digital. Well, not just before. 66. And so everything was mechanical. Everything was mechanical. The slide, just an electrical impulse to a solenoid, advance the slide. You're not pulling up a new JPEG. It's just advancing the slide. Drop it in. If the slide hangs, and that happened occasionally, you got a white screen in a dark room. So the planetarium operator's nightmare is this. Down here are 3 black knobs. 1, 2, 3. And there's a detent in the center, and you can crack it, and it'll go slowly, and the more you turn it, the faster it'll go, right? And what these 3 things are the cove lights. Around the outside of the planetarium, there's a little ledge, indentation, and we've got 3 rows of fluorescent lights that have got different colored gels on it. And so, one set is blue, one set is yellow, and one set is red. And if all the lights are down and you reach for the red switch and you just crack it, in the room behind us, right behind the door, you can hear this. It is a mechanical wheel spinning with little brushes going over little cams, And so these red lights start coming up real slowly. If you crank it, then they'll come up real fast. And the planetarium nightmare is, I'm in the middle of a show. Everything's great. All right, going on. And I bring up the reds just a little bit. Or you bring up the yellows or the blues. You bring up the blues just a little bit to simulate like city nights, like a little bit of an atmosphere. So everything's great. And as I bring up the reds and so on, just a little bit, a little flavor, just a little touch. And they just keep coming up. They keep coming up. It's like, oh, I can't stop this thing. The room's getting brighter and brighter and brighter. And then in the middle of the show, everybody gets up and leaves. And I'm saying, no, it's not over. It's not over. I can't get the lights off. I don't think that's a common nightmare. I really don't think there's a whole lot of people who experience that nightmare. But anyway, that was the cove light system. Doug Gagan up there. Those are fun times. I mean, who gets that life, right? Who gets to grow up in a planetarium around that kind of brilliance? Yeah. Anyway, all right. I think this will probably do it now. Yeah. All right. I just had to get that Neil deGrasse Tyson thing out of my system because I'd seen that interview since the last time I was here, and no, we had a consensus. It's about a consensus. Science is about a consensus. You're an idiot. Science is about a consensus. Freaky. I don't believe I am, Marusha. I'm sorry. I just got a lot to do tomorrow. Uh, yeah, yeah. Uh, don't count on this, but I'm relatively sure that the Air Force Museum will be either a week from Saturday or Sunday, and I will let you know. And um, and I was going to push and just once it closed, just start driving back to Hickory, North Carolina, 7 hours. Get there around 3 in the morning. But I was talked into spending the night there, so we'll be there the night before, we'll be there the day of, and then there will be there that night. And the reason that I just convinced me to stay is because if you're able to get there, then we can all just pile out and go some dinner someplace. We'll just find a big old restaurant and just go. Um, wow. Let's see. Limescale 12 says, "Howdy, Bill. I'll be back on South Padre to watch the launch on Thursday, 4/20. Today's scrub launch was due to a release lock failing to release." Wow. I'm glad you're there. It sounds like you're there, man, and that's just terrific. I was actually, I was a little. I didn't realize what the mission was until about 2 days earlier. I thought that they were going to do what they would eventually do. I thought they were going to try to catch the booster, and I thought they were going to try and stick the Starship landing. I thought we are going to see all of that. The Starship landing would be, an orbit later or something. But turns out they're both going into the ocean. The Starship 24 is going to hit the water hard. It's going to lawn dart into the ocean. But they're going to try and the booster. They're going to try and retro break that and basically land it in the water softly enough so they can reuse it. And it makes sense. You've only got the one launch tower. I think Elon said success is, it's not a failure if we blow things up. Success is if we only lose that one vehicle, not the entire complex. So anyway, I 30 minutes away from Starbase. That's great, man. That's fantastic. So anyway, so we are here to say that when I do make the announcement of what day we'll be at the Air Force Museum, if anybody wants to hang out and go out for dinner afterwards, we would love to have you. It would be oh, I read that wrong. Oh my God. Sad Wings Raging said, "You can pry my lawn darts from my cold dead hands." And I think, yeah, that's great, but that's not how I read it. I just glanced at it and I thought you said, "You can pry my lawn darts from my cold dead brother." That's what happens when you don't have eyesight anymore. And that was even more hilarious. Okay, kids. I've never been to any of the Air Force museums, so we're looking forward to that. That'll do it for this edition of the Stress Free Studio, made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com who continue to stay with us through thick and thin, and been more thick than thin than thick, whoever, you get the general idea. Illegal immigrant. Bill thinks Armageddon was based on a true story. I actually didn't. I think. Oh yeah, we've got a troll here. We never went beyond 65 miles up. I'm not going to start. I'm just actually at the point now where when I run into these deniers, moon landing deniers, I just actually feel really sad for them. That it's just that there's something so small about you that you can't accept anything as well documented as 6 trips to the frickin' moon. I really got to be a really pretty blinkered person to not be able to process that, but that's the way it goes. All right. Anyway, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you on Thursday for the Stress Free Lounge.